Starting now. Got 20 out there, 21.
Okay.
No, now my cat's acting up. Right at showtime. Come on. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, here they come.
Mhm. Good morning or good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here for a webinar to have a little chat about ARIST. I think I will start by asking everyone to please mute their microphones. You can leave your cameras on or you can turn them off until the presentation's finished and we'll come together for a bit of discussion time. I am your host. I am Dr. Lisa Given. I am editor-in-chief of ARIST, and I've got a couple of my colleagues with us today. Dr. John Budd, you can wave your hand, John, and Dr. Bhuva Narayan, including her puppy, who may make an appearance depending on how we go with today's webinar. And we've also got Garrett Doherty and his kitten, who's I think doing very well to behave so far today. We are going to be talking through a little bit about writing for ARIST, but we definitely have a lot of time built into the session today for your questions and for you to ask us, if you wish, any ideas that you might have about publishing in ARIST. We're going to go through a presentation to start with, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end of the session. So please write down your questions as we go, where we can happily go back to earlier parts of the seminar content, but please just make note of your questions and then we'll open it up at the end. For those of you who've just joined us, we just ask that you please mute your microphones as we go through the presentation, and then we will pull down the seminar slides and have a chat as we get to the end. So I would like to start today by acknowledging the Boiwurrung and Woiwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose lands I am meeting with you today here in Melbourne, Australia, and to pay my respect to any elders past, present, and including those who may be on today's call. So ARIST, what an exciting year it has been for ARIST. We have been spending many, many months getting this publication back in its kind of firm place within our discipline. As you may know, ARIST was an extremely popular series of chapters that went on hiatus for about a decade. And so we're really excited that we are able to contribute to the field by reviving this publication. And we're very excited that so many people have actually jumped in, put in expressions of interest, talked to us about different topics that they'd like to publish for ARIST. And so today's session is really to encourage you and to encourage perhaps you even to talk to your students and your colleagues about what you might do to contribute to ARIST in the future. And we're really building this pipeline so that what we can be doing is, with every successive year, have a number of really exciting papers that are going to come out in the collected ARIST volume. But as you'll learn, we're also able to publish these online as they're ready to go, so that there isn't that kind of wait of a delay time while the collected work is in preparation. So what I want to start with today is just some of the detail work, some of the logistics around writing for ARIST, and then I'll be turning it over to my colleagues to dig a little deeper into why you should consider submitting and also what makes a great review. So the first piece that I would mention is that we are very open to a range of different topics, different ideas that you might have about how you can contribute to ARIST. If you look back at some of the earlier issues, and you'll see there, it was published continuously from 1966 through to 2011, we have a lot of different topics you can dig through in the archive, have a read of what's there, the history, the collected work of ARIST. It really is a landmark publication that has served many people throughout doctoral studies as they've been writing grant applications. I myself, as a doctoral student, really relied on ARIST just to give me a view of the state of the field, what had come before, and to start to document in my own journey as a researcher in this area. And so even looking back at some of those older reviews may give you a window into the types of things that we published in the past, the kinds of things that could be updated, but that's not to say that we have to stop there. Certainly new and emerging research topics, things that in 1966 we didn't even see coming, even in 2011 we might not have seen coming. This is just a small list of a handful of things that kind of come to mind when we think about things that are very current, things that we are still exploring or just starting to explore within our field. So when you're thinking about how to consider a topic for ARIST, it's really about taking a look at the scope of the journal, who we are, who we're trying to target, and what our audience might be interested in. But certainly the field is extremely diverse and it's a very broad range. So you do have your work cut out for you in terms of narrowing down what you might like to pitch. Our first paper is actually online if you want to take a look at something that is already out and ready to roll. Understanding Data Cultures, the Influences, Activities, and Initiatives by Gillian Oliver and colleagues. This was a very exciting piece of work coming out this year as we look ahead to our first issue. As I mentioned, when papers are ready, they go up in early view on the Scholar One platform, which is the same platform that ASIS&T uses. And that means that they're ready for people to read, to cite, to share from the moment that they make it through production. We then collect all of the papers together as a bundle, and we will be issuing then an actual ARIST issue that will come out either towards the end of this year or the early part of 2024. The way that we have set ARIST up is actually a two-step process. We do have a website, so asis.org/ARIST provides you with details on the author guidelines, the editorial board, so you can learn a little more about where ARIST is up to at the minute. But we have a two-step process, and what this does is it enables us to really start to plan those future issues to make sure that people are not working in isolation, perhaps on the same topic. Sometimes that does happen, especially if it's a hot topic. But the idea also is to give you some feedback on that initial expression of interest, that initial proposal that you're considering for ARIST. So I look at this as it's never too early to submit an expression of interest. If it needs a bit of work, we may come back to you with some suggestions. We may ask for a revision of that expression of interest, but you also are given the opportunity to tell us what your proposed deadline is for the receipt of the full manuscript. So you don't have to have a full manuscript in hand ready to go when you submit the EOI. In fact, sometimes it's easier not to, because we can then give you some feedback as you start out at the early stage of writing. We've also tried to keep it quite brief. These word limits are not written in stone, but our goal is not to make a lot of work for people. It's really just to start to give us a flavor for what is this topic? Is it something that's going to be relevant to the readership? Why should we care about the topic if I'm an ARIST reader? And then that deadline of when you expect to have the manuscript ready to go so that we can start planning out our issues. What we do in that process then is the editorial board members review the EOIs. We will send a notice of approval, and at that point invite you to write the full manuscript. Full manuscripts are longer than a traditional research paper. We've got 10 to 15,000 words, can be taken up for the review when, many papers, including for ASIS&T, run about 7,500 or so these days. And the full manuscript goes out for regular peer review. So once you've submitted that review, it's very similar to any other peer review process. We send it out, we shepherd the paper through that process. There will often be revisions to the full manuscript and the usual back and forth that you might expect with other kinds of paper submissions. And once it's ready to go, it then hops into production and a very quick turnaround time in order to be available online. So that's a lot of background information. What I'm going to do next is turn it over to John Budd, who's going to give you a little bit of a hook in terms of why you should consider publishing with us. John?
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yes, I am John Budd, and as you can see, I'm an editorial board member. I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Missouri here in the United States. I will mention one thing in addition to Lisa's background. The editorial board is fairly large and it is genuinely international. I believe the only continent not represented is Antarctica. Lisa, is nodding her head, so I'm correct in that.
We'll try.
Very good.
We'll try.
We'll try, yeah. We'll get a researcher down there to write a paper for us and then recruit them to the editorial board. Next slide, please. Why publish in ARIST? Well, there are a number of reasons, and some of which you may be aware of already. And it may be that somebody in the audience has already published in ARIST. But if you haven't and you're looking for an impact-making contribution to the field, this can be a major step towards that goal. It will give you a major publication for your CV. It's not a tenure or promotion maker, but it certainly is a tenure or promotion helper. It is a big, big paper. As Lisa said, it's 10 to 15,000 words. It provides you with the prestige of a refereed ARIST and JASIS article, since we publish in the JASIS journal as a special issue. It will boost your citation count. As Lisa mentioned, she used this. I used this for many projects from student days onward, and you can count on it boosting your citations in a substantive way. And lastly, well, not lastly, but last on this list, it provides a genuine service to your colleagues all over the world. And that can't be overstated. And it's so important that I'll come back to it in just a moment. But if we can have the next slide, please. Why publish as a doctoral student? Well, I hope there are some doctoral students in the virtual audience. And if there's not, then there are people who probably advise doctoral students, and you can send this message along to them. As part of your dissertation work, you have to conduct a substantive literature review. It has to be in-depth, it has to be detailed, and it must be, as Buva will highlight later, systematic review of the literature. This review informs the rest of your work as a student, as a dissertation writer, or for those of you who may be writing a book, then you will be doing a substantive literature review as well. And you can see the previous slide. It helps your CV. It's a prestigious publication, and it's a great service to your colleagues all over the place. So if you are a doctoral student and you will be engaging in this kind of work, then give a thought to ARIST as maybe that first publication out the gate when you have your degree in hand and it's been vetted by your committee. If you are an advisor, then please instill in your students the knowledge that this is something they will be doing anyway. And if you follow Buva's advice to come about being systematic with the review, then you will have a product in hand ready to go right out the door. And last slide for me. More on review article as a service. Everybody, Lisa, me, Buva, all of you who researchers in the field have to examine the literature relevant to your work. You have to conduct a literature search. Well, one of the first places to start in the past was ARIST in its print form, and now ARIST in both virtual, well, it won't be in print anymore, will it? Since JASIS is now electronic. So in digital form, it will be there in the future for you to consult in your own work, and you can provide this service to others by thinking about submitting an expression of interest and maybe a full paper and getting it published, one of the first sources just about anyone cites and consults has been an ARIST article. I have been doing work on cognition and information. And about 30 years ago, there was an article on cognition. So I really don't feel that I have to delve deeply into the older literature because someone has done that groundwork already. But if somebody wants to pick up that work today, it may need to be redone. Now, not only is previous work mentioned, it is critically reviewed. This is something very, very important for you as a user of ARIST and you as a writer for ARIST. This gets into the systematic nature of reviews. And so now is the time I can turn it over to Bhuva.
Hello, everyone. Good morning from Gadigal land at the Eora Nation on Sydney. I have a bit of a flu and cold, but don't mind my strange voice today. Thank you for having me, Lisa, today. And you can go on to the next slide. John mentioned systematic a few times. I just want to put in there that I don't mean systematic literature reviews as such, because there are many different types of reviews. I think he meant systematic as in a methodical and structured manner to start and finish your review. There are many different types of reviews, of course. However, it is a kind of a misnomer. So I'd like to start with saying that it's not really a review of the literature in the way it's a book review or a summary of the literature or things like it's more of an essay around the literature is what I kind of personally think of it and talk to my own students in the same way. Most of you probably have done a lot of literature reviews, but for ARIST, as you know, it's a much, much longer literature review than it would be inside of any other published article in our field. But the way that I like to approach it is to think of the literature review essay or literature review paper as something, as an exercise in data analysis, as one of the first exercises in data analysis that a student or an amateur or a person starting out in the research field can do. So if I give 20 papers to all of my students and ask them to write a review of those 20 papers, obviously I will have 20 unique literature reviews. And that is the kind of thing that, we look for, as in what is unique about this particular perspective that this person brings to these 20 papers that are already published. You could look at it from various different, through various different lenses. You can interpret those 20 different papers in the last 5 years or whatever your kind of limitation or boundaries that you set around a particular topic. Let's say, for example, you want to write something around AI or ChatGPT, which is in the news every day now. How does it relate to our field, library information science? Yes, it does. And it is one of those possible literatures where there is absolutely no consensus. So what kind of literature review would you write in that field that is actually based on scholarly research? There may not be a lot of scholarly research in our field in this area, so you will need to draw from interdisciplinary sources that are adjacent to our field. And fortunately, we are sitting in a field that is adjacent to quite a few different disciplines that are always growing and maturing every day. So that's a good thing for us. And look for things like, what are the core questions in a paper? And does it relate to what your topic of the literature review is? What are the schools of thought in the past and how has it evolved? And is it relevant to what you're trying to make a point about in your, so the author's own voice is important, even though it's a literature review, you are still the author of that paper. You're simply drawing on other people's expertise from the past without having to reinvent what they did. The next one, Lisa. And of course, there are these different various approaches. I don't have the time to go into all of these, but for example, if you think about synthesized coherence, which is what we've always done traditionally in literature reviews, and we can do a progressive paper on how things have evolved. But in the third one, for example, the non-coherence approach, you can show a lot of related contributions in one particular area, but then that there is no overall agreement. And often PhD students try to start in this manner in order to establish a gap that they can fill, but that's not necessarily the only way. You can build on things with new perspectives. You know, you don't necessarily need to fill a gap. You can invent a new way forward or a path forward or suggest it, or even simply say that this is the literature, but things have changed and that doesn't hold anymore. The next slide, please, Lisa. So what I try to explain to some of our doctoral students is that it's kind of like a roundtable discussion, but you have the advantage of inviting people from different timelines, people who are, know more, for example, in your field, experts from 40 years ago and possibly emerging experts, and have them, around a table for a panel discussion, but you are the MC of that discussion. So the next slide, Lisa, thank you. So you can actually start and stop anyone at any given point based on the relevance to your topic. So just because you're including a paper in your literature review does not mean that you need to talk about their whole research or their whole paper or, everything that they've done or everything that the paper says. Just pick and choose what's relevant to, in a meaningful way to your narrative. And then be the master of ceremonies. The better you are at controlling the panel in that way, even though it's not a real panel, it is a panel discussion that is happening within your literature review paper. So be mindful of that. You do have an audience. The audience is the reader, and the panel are the people that have already published in the area. So if you think of it in that way, it's often helpful to understand what you're doing. The next slide, Lisa. And there are two main approaches. Of course, there are lots of sub-approaches. The first one is the systematic literature review. It's often not as interesting for us in our field as the narrative literature review, for example. It is very useful to do a systematic literature review if there are like an hypotheses and kind of a quantity or measurement focus in the literature, for example. That definitely has a place in ARIST. However, personally, the narrative interpretivist literature review is often much more interesting to read, and also it is much more interesting for you to write. Because you could bring in your own personal expertise, maybe not opinion so much, but you can always slip in an opinion or two here and there, which we all do. And also to kind of identify the discourse, because there is always a discourse around anything, any new technology or service and things like that, which has, negative, positive, people who advocate for it, people who may not, and things like that. So just these from me, I think. And do I have another slide? Yes, no, this is the contacts for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Buva, and thank you, John, for those wise words. This is just our last slide, which I'll pull down in a second, but just again to remind you of the ARIST website and where you can find us. And certainly our email address, arist@asis.org. Garrett, as managing editor for ARIST, is really extremely adept at understanding the ins and outs of the Scholar One portal and any of the kind of logistics that you might encounter when you're submitting an EOI. So feel free to reach out to him if you run into any challenges in doing so. And certainly myself and all of the editorial board members are very open to receiving contact from you. You should feel free if there's someone that you look at the editorial board member list and you think, oh, I know these folks, please do reach out to them, reach out to any one of us with questions. But what we want to do today is we've got a good half hour or so to take some of your questions. So I'm just going to stop sharing for the moment. There we go. Oops. Let me get back to where my screen was. Great. And I know we've probably had a little bit of action in the chat, so we can definitely start there. But if there are people who put their questions into the chat, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Don't be shy. Questions, comments?
Lisa, it's Wes Ward here. As you know, I'm never backwards in saying things.
Hey, Wes.
There are a few questions in the chat box. I'll just point that through to you now. So if you want to do that one, I'll go offline so you can have a read through those.
Thank you. No worries. That's exactly. I'm just scrolling through. Susan asks, when you mentioned we should suggest 2 possible reviewers, are these from your editorial board or just any outside reviewer? Great question. Those are actually outside reviewers. So imagine your EOI gets all the way through to full manuscript and you are ready to go under peer review. What we're looking for there is just a couple of names of who do you think would be the ideal person to review this paper. Now, obviously, if they're on the editorial board, that's fine, but we already know who those folks are and we can track them down. So what we're really looking for is perhaps a window into the folks that we might not otherwise know who they are. And there's someone that we may or may not tap on the shoulder to have a look, but it gives us a feel for also sometimes where you position the topic, especially if it's an interdisciplinary topic. It can sometimes be an open question as to who might be just right to review the paper. So we really do value those suggestions that you make, and we ask for those right up the front at EOI stage. Just reading through the rest of the questions. Okay. Abebe. Thank you for coming out. Oh, and thank you for saying ARIST is in very good hands, baby. That's really lovely. So you're saying that your experience in North America is that junior tenure track faculty are often advised to do and publish original research rather than review articles. Is this the case in your regions? Are the editors seeing more submissions from one or another category of faculty/authors? That's a really great question. I don't know that it is regionally specific. I think here in Australia, we're certainly encouraged to be writing publications that will appear in very top quality venues. And I think this may be an interesting shift that we should think about when we're thinking about ARIST, because in my experience in the past, a lot of review papers have appeared as in the old style of ARIST in a book form, in book chapters. And for right or for wrong, there are many people who believe that a book chapter is not as valuable as a journal article. We won't get into that debate here, but certainly a lot of the ranking systems that universities use, a lot of the mechanisms we have to assess a good venue tend to lean towards journals. And so I think that there has definitely been a global push towards journal publication. The benefit now of publishing an ARIST review is that we sit within the JASIST family, if you will. So the ISSN that we use is JASIS ISSN. It is considered a Q1 and even an elite journal by the global rankings. And so publishing a review in ARIST would carry just as much prestige from a citation standpoint and a journal ranking as a research paper, as a results-based paper. And so that may be an interesting message to kind of take back to your institutions if you're finding that they're giving that kind of advice. To me, if we go back to Buva's comment about if we see this really as a data analysis practice, in a way, it's like doing a content review. It's not a lit review that lacks criticality or that lacks a systematic approach to data collection. It's just that you're collecting texts, you're collecting materials, and you're assessing those. So I suppose my worry would be that I think people are making a bit of a naive assessment of a review. If they are saying, directing people away from them, they may not understand the rigor and the level of systematic reviewing that goes into preparing one of these. John or Buva, I don't know if you have other comments you want to add.
Yes. Sorry, good.
Sorry,
Go
you
ahead,
go
John.
first, Buva. Okay, I'll go first. I'm going to put in another plug for citations because even among the institutions that Abebe has in mind, citation counts looms large when it comes to evaluation and individual assessment for annual reviews, for tenure, for promotion, and so forth. And it is almost guaranteed that an ARIST article is going to generate citations if it is done well. And we'll assume that it is done well if it passes the EOI state and then the publication state and actually appears in JASIS form. So that's all I need to say.
Yes,
Thanks,
I
John.
agree completely. I don't see my own institution discriminating against any literature reviews. They often don't care. They don't look at the article. They look at the citation. They look at the journal where it is published. And that's it. I mean, none of our ARIST literature reviews are going to say literature review on the title itself. It is published in ARIST, and that is it. And it's a JASIS branded journal. And even otherwise, in other journals, I have always published a lot of literature reviews, mostly that I find it really useful as a way to synthesize the field for myself and my own, students who are taking it forward. I have never had that issue of anyone pointing out that it's only a literature review and not a results-based, because the research metrics don't care about that. They just care about the metrics. So yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much,
Buva.
Lisa, John, and Buva. Just to provide some context, some institutions actually allow the candidate for promotion and tenure to make arguments for why those articles are as important, if not more important than journal articles. So I just wanted to hear what others' experiences are, because this is important for junior faculty mentoring, because you send them the wrong message. They may not appreciate it if they're denied tenure. So it is a very sensitive topic, and at least in the institution I've been at for the last 21, 22 years. So.
Thank you for the question, Abebe. It's really helpful for us to understand that context as well, because we may be encouraging people without realizing why they may be saying no to us. And I'm going to just ask Garrett to make a note. I think this is a really good area where we could be doing some promotional work or explanation of these kinds of issues and kind of try to tackle that as a discipline, because this really is so important for us to have a really firm grounding in our own history and really understand the evolution of these topics. We don't want, someone's lack of understanding, in my view, of the importance of a review paper. Although I certainly understand and appreciate if that's the feedback people are getting from a tenure committee, they may need to wait until they've received tenure to do this kind of writing. But in a way, that's all right too, because we definitely need people at all career stages publishing in ARIST, and often, more senior people have maybe a bit more, many years under their belt to really look at the history of the field and to write quite a different paper than someone at a very junior stage. So it is a matter of taking all those factors into account, but I hope that we can maybe, at least have put your mind at ease. And I think it's worth people trying to do their homework on the value of the citation process and what this could mean. Yep.
Absolutely. Just thank you, Lisa, for that. So just looking at, the submissions you're getting, I know it's a lot of work for Garrett probably is who is submitting this, right? So, where are they coming from? And even doing some analysis by region, right? So,
yes, absolutely. I would say, at the moment, just to give you a bit of context, we've got about, more than 20 papers in various stages of review, which is quite remarkable given that, we've only had the Scholar One system up for a very short time, and getting the word out that ARIST is back. They are from many different countries around the world on a variety of different topics, everything from thinking about embodiment to misinformation. There are a lot of different topics that have already been pitched, and that's why the EOI process is also really helpful, because it starts to give us a feeling for what are some of the gaps, where are some of, whether it's countries that we could be targeting or particular topics, particular areas of expertise. Once we've got that pipeline in the works, it helps all the editorial board members to identify those kinds of gaps. So I feel as though we're really just getting started, but this is such an exciting year. And I keep saying to Garrett, this time next year, we're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of where we were a year ago, when this was really just still an imagining and a bit of a vision of what we were hoping to have. Yeah. So I hope you're thinking of writing one, Abebe. We look forward to your submission.
I wish I have, absolutely. I think we missed this. I think it was really credit to obviously all of you for taking the leadership. And I think people are happy because, as John said, we have all assigned ARIST readings to our students for our courses, and we missed those. So thank you again.
Thank you. And before I jump, I see we've got a couple of people with their hands up. I just wanted to first go back to Susan's question, which is, I think, one of the last ones we have in the chat, which is asking, is there someone we can talk to about a possible topic, or do we just go for it? Do we just submit an EOI and see what happens? And is it a hard accept or reject, or could there be a revised EOI? What I'm finding, just to give you a sense of things, absolutely, if you just want to go for it and submit one, that's wonderful. Always very happy just to get them through that process. We are sometimes asking for a revision if we really can't quite see exactly where the review will go, or more commonly, it's often because people are not very clear about the process of being systematic. What is their methodology that they're going to put to the paper? So that's one of the key areas where we sometimes ask for a revision. But in other cases, those kind of cold call EOIs are coming in, and we are able to accept them. We sometimes just give you feedback and say, please take X and Y and Z into account when you're writing up the full manuscript. But we agree, this is a great topic. The idea you have is clearly a fit for ARIST. Go forth and start writing. So the sooner you get it into the system, it's just good, because it gives us really clear visibility, and it keeps our inboxes not quite so crazy, because many of us do have very, very full inboxes. But if you're really unsure, absolutely, just reach out to any one of us and we'll give you some advice. All right, going back, and I believe it was Meredith that maybe had her hand up first.
Yes, hi, thank you for the webinar, so many helpful information. So I'm a third-year PhD student in information science from Indiana University, Bloomington, and Professor Howard Rosenbaum, we're working on a systematic lit review. And according to your author guidelines, you suggest we submit the EOI via the Scholar One submission system. which appears to asking, like, it seems like it's asking for more information than you mentioned in the step 1 requirements. Like in step 2, we need to upload a file. Maybe before, like for a common submission, usually that's where you submit the manuscript, but now it is EOI maybe? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, great question. Thank you so much. And again, Garrett, we might need to just tweak our author guidelines a little bit to provide some context. One of the challenges that we've had is that we're working within the existing Scholar One portal framework, and it was not designed for EOIs. So we're kind of pushing the envelope when it comes to the way Scholar One handles these materials, and that means we've had to do a lot of workarounds. So you're quite right. For example, we didn't realize that there would be this requirement to upload something. So if you could just basically take, if you've prepared your ideas on a Word document, you could just push that up as a document into the system. You don't need to do any extra work. It's just a bit of an annoyance that unfortunately you do have to do that. There may be the odd question where it seems not applicable. Like I think there's a question about how many tables or figures will you have? And there's no way for us to get rid of that. So if you know down the track, oh, this is going to be a very visually oriented piece, and you're imagining a half dozen tables, you could put that into that. Otherwise, you can just say not applicable or just move on from that question. So that's one of the things that Garrett and I are continuing to do is identify these small things that kind of can trip people up or that are holdovers from the regular reviewing process. And we're working really closely with Wiley and the Scholar One team to find ways to fix these little problems. But don't let that deter you. And if you're unsure, just don't worry about the question, just move through it. And if there's something else we need, we'll come back to you. But I'm excited to hear that you're working on one. That's great.
I think John has
John,
his hand up.
Yep.
I just wanted to add one thing. I'll be generous and say that Scholar One is idiosyncratic. Those of us who work with it and have worked with it know that it's not the easiest system in the world. I'm a co-editor for Jealous, and we use that as well. So we'll sympathize with you and even empathize with you as you work through it. But do contact us if you have any questions about it, and we'll work with you to get the system to work for you.
Oh, and one more question. Is the submission deadline negotiable? Because we're still collecting the papers like from the recently published ones, and we're still coding them. So once we are finished with that, we can get back and put the results in. So the submission deadline is very hard deadline, or is that something we can talk about? Okay.
Absolutely. And so at the EOI stage, you tell us when you want to submit. So that's why I say an EOI coming in an early stage is really helpful for me, because you might say, oh, this paper is going to come in November 2023. And I say, okay. And then I'm wondering, is that going to be in time for the first issue or not? When, where is that going to sit? But I've got other people who've already pitched things that are going to come in early 2024. And that's good to know, because then I think, okay, now I can plan out issue number 2 or even issue number 3, knowing that these things are in the pipeline. Now, certainly, like anything, you may suddenly hit a glitch in your writing and you say, oh, I promised this in June, but now I know it's not going to be done in June. If you do pitch a date and we agree on that date, and then you need an extension, please contact me as soon as you know that you're going to miss it, because that can really affect our production schedule. And I need to really work with you on what do you think the timeline is. Right now, we're being quite flexible because we're still working up our pipeline and our first issue. But say a year from now or 2 years from now, it will probably be getting a bit tighter on making sure people meet their deadlines so that we get those issues out on a regular basis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think, was it Michael was next on the hands?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I wonder if you could comment on the open access possibilities for the ARIST articles, whether that's available or how that might be available.
Thanks. So because we're a Wiley journal, we're following basically exactly the same process as for JASIST. I know currently Wiley is negotiating kind of different types of transformative agreements with universities or with agencies around the world. So for example, the Australian Libraries Consortia just negotiated a deal with Wiley that will enable authors in this country to cover off those kinds of charges. So I can't speak for Wiley. I don't have all the answers at this minute because I'm just not across the details of how that works for every country. But currently we don't have, I think we don't have an APC, but the problem is that the free version does not then provide you or has not historically provided open access. But now that other agreements are being negotiated, that's very much a changeable space.
So just to confirm that if there are these transformative agreements in place, and there certainly is one in Canada where I'm from, that will facilitate open access for those articles.
It should, but you've got to read the details of your agreement because they are different for every country. That's why I say I don't want to like presume where people are. I don't know what the agreement's like in Canada. So you've got to read the fine print. But I understand that will provide that level of access in some of those agreements. And who have we got now? Is that Howard?
Hi, Lisa and John. And just a couple quick things. One, thank you for answering our questions. Meredith and I were struggling as we were trying to put in our EOI, and I was going to ask some more questions, but she covered all of them. So I'm very happy about that. So we should probably have ours in sometime next week. Second, thank you for bringing ARIST back. Way back in the old days, ARIST used to be edited from my little school of library and information science. So we were all watching it grow back then. And I second everything John said. It's a great source and it's wonderful that it's coming back. You answered the question I was going to ask. So that's all I have to say.
Easy. Well, thank you so much, Howard. And what I really do appreciate your comments, and many people really are excited that ARIST is back. And I love that you're also voting with your own 2 feet and throwing something into the mix, because I think that's it's how do we convert everyone who feels great about ARIST into an author or a reviewer or this is a whole of life cycle process. And we're also going to need people to agree to review, as we know that everybody's time pressed. And I know that reviewers around the world are really holding firm around their time as being very precious because especially post-COVID, our lives have gotten a lot more complex. But it's wonderful. I'm really excited and I can't wait to see the EOI. And FYI, we do have a fairly quick turnaround time on EOIs. So our goal is to basically get a decision to people within, a week or 2 of receiving that EOI, so that then you can get on with the writing. Or if we have questions, we can tic-tac back and forth, but get you an answer as quickly as we can.
Wonderful. I did remember one other thing I wanted to say. It cycles back to the conversation about whether it's a good idea for early career people to do this. I was the chair of the school P&T committee in my institution at Luddy for 6 years. So I saw many dozens of resumes come through. Nobody has a resume that's all literature reviews. Somebody might have one in the midst of all of their research. So that's all I wanted to say, that it is a good idea. And I remember when ARIST was living in our department, our school, the editor would be watching dissertation defenses around the country and actually approaching doctoral students and saying, hey, would you be interested? So,
great idea. Great idea. I'm going to start stalking people. That's what I'll get the editorial board to do.
Go to the student award sessions at ASIS and you'll see some of the
Absolutely.
very best. And
Absolutely.
If we get you into the doctoral colloquium as a mentor, you'll also see 15 people a year on that.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. Well, we definitely, I will be at ASIS this year, and we are also putting together an information session to have more discussions just like this. So be forewarned, people going to ASIS are going to be, accosted in hallways. And, we've talked about just branding and what we're going to do to put ARIST in front of everybody. So that's great. And the other point I'd add on that question of, should a pre-tenure person be doing this work, or a doctoral student? I also think there's nothing better than kind of being named, an expert in a particular field right out of the gate. I recall when we used to talk about ARIST reviews, that the person was always attached to the topic. And if you were then looking for something, you'd be saying, oh, you have to talk to person X because they've written this review. They're clearly kind of the world's expert on this topic. And so, having that name, especially on some really hot and upcoming areas, which is often what our PhD students are doing, there's nothing better than that. Wes is our next hand.
Hi, Lisa. Great seminar and great questions too coming from everyone. I have a question, and it's sort of around my area. And firstly, totally support review articles. There's a great one that I did for my own PhD that I quoted all the way through. It was fantastic summary of what I was looking for anyway. Is there any support or looking at any support for non-native English speakers for them to get some support, particularly with language in preparing their manuscripts and that sort of thing? Has there been any thought being put into that?
Oh, that's a great and big question. I'm first going to actually ask Garrett this question because he's been working as managing editor with ASIS&T also for several years now. Garrett, can I put you on the spot on this one?
I guess it's a tough question to answer. I haven't run across any non-native English writing support. Yeah. So
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was
it's
anything,
not
through
such a
the Wiley
tough question,
system.
and that the answer is no. As far
Yes,
as I know.
it's a tough and important question, but we don't have easy answers is the bottom line. Yeah, I think like many journals, we often rely on people, bringing manuscripts, having already received support from mentors and colleagues in reading those drafts. There's no doubt that, I give that advice to anyone, no matter their background, to run draft papers by other people before they submit them, because you can often catch a lot of the things that a peer reviewer is going to catch. Again, I'm going to ask Garrett to add this to our list of things to discuss in future, because it's not something that we have actually discussed at all. I think we've been so focused on getting this thing up and running logistically that we haven't started branching into what are some of the other value add processes that we could have. But I also meet with Steve, the editor of ASIS&T, and also with Chirag as editor of Information Matters around, just as kind of the editorial team that's connected to ASIS&T. And this might also be something that the three of us could have a discussion on, because I'm sure that, dealing with the kinds of support that you're talking about, Wes, is something that would affect all three publications.
I might just support that. I hopefully will get to ASIS&T conference this year myself too. And so I've sort of put up my hand to say that I could possibly assist with that, because I've done it in the past in my own professional work, and I continue to do it now. So it's something I can, if you're looking for a few volunteers to help with that one, I have worked in that in the past. So
thank you, Wes. I know Garrett's writing your name down as we speak. I can feel it.
I can feel that.
But yes, that would be great. I think that is definitely, there's no doubt that people do need help with writing. It's just a question of how do we do that? And I think that's also an interesting question we can then take back to ASIS&T headquarters. Yeah. But for the conference, that's kind of interesting. It could even be something around a panel or a workshop or some other kind of mechanism there. So maybe if you just want to flick me an email, or myself and Garrett both, we can kind of pursue that for the conference if you think you're going to make it to London. Cool. Thank you. We've got about 6 minutes left. Any other questions or comments or Anybody want to pitch a topic now that you're really excited? You want to like get some feedback? Everybody's microphones go mute. Or John and Buva, do you have anything else that you wanted to say as kind of a last words on ARIST?
Sure. Also, do think about collaboration with others in writing a literature review article for ARIST. I think it's quite valuable to have various perspectives come together, and especially with, 10 to 15,000 words, you might be really exhausted. You need help. So, co-authored articles are much more powerful in many of these areas that we deal with in ARIST. So, just pitching collaboration. At least in my university, we do get extra points for collaborating with international researchers. So I'm not sure how others feel, but I think it is quite valuable for yourself in general, not just to be working with someone who is an expert in the field, but to have the experience of writing together with someone internationally or even in your own country.
Thanks, Buva. That's great advice. I can think of one set of authors that are currently finalizing a manuscript where it started with a discussion with me with one author, and then that person decided to reach out. We started thinking about, well, who else would be out there? This is a junior scholar. And now we've got 3 authors on the paper, all coming from very different perspectives. And it's actually going to it's really strengthened that paper. It's going to be very exciting to read because it's a different paper to what might have first been imagined, but in terms of a broad review and coming at the topic from multiple angles, it's very enriching. The other piece I'd add is also don't forget about professionals in the field. For example, if you're writing something on a particular practice or on a new technology, there may be some information professionals with expertise who are also very keen to do some writing and contribute. And particularly many of our information professionals are doing a PhD and are looking for ways to start to publish. So this could also be a nice way to branch out and think about people that are working out in the industry. John, any final words from you today?
I'll just give a little bit of history here because I did serve 2 separate terms on the ASIS Publications Committee over the past several years. And the revival of ARIST came up a few years ago, and there was great support for it. What was the sticking point over time was what's going to be the platform? How is it going to be disseminated? And we came up with a solution to that, and Lisa deserves a lot of credit along with Garrett and all of the ASIS staff and Steve for putting it in connection with JASIS. So we may somehow, some way, someday expand to 2 issues a year. Who knows?
Absolutely. The world is open at this point. So it is exciting times. I know it's just a couple of minutes left. If you do have a final question you want to pop in the chat or put your hand up, now is your moment. But I really want to thank you all for coming today. The questions have been fantastic. We've now got some good, solid areas where we can be communicating about some of our ideas and connecting with you. And I look forward to seeing your EOIs. So we'll be turning on the inbox now and seeing what pops out. So feel free to reach out. Great to see you. And I hope that we will see many of you in the UK in October for ASIST. Great. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.